Oh, we're recording this. Um, Welcome, everyone, um, to our third meeting of the internship class. We have a guest tonight, Cyndi Stark. I will let Cyndi introduce herself uh, more thoroughly, although I will say that Cyndi was an outstanding student at Harper's interior design program. Did a lot of excellent work and has been off being successful. So then can tell everyone about the work you're doing and a little bit about your career as a musician. Um, but also one of the things I wanted to talk about, we'll get to this maybe later on, is interviewing, because interviewing can be a kind of like a stressful, mysterious thing. Like, how do you prepare for it? Um, I think it can be very difficult to prepare for something like that when every interview is different and different, different jobs. It's kind of hard to predict what they like how to prepare for different, for different employers. And so you kind of like work on more general approaches to it. So I was curious to get Cyndi's um, ideas about it, because I have my ideas about interviewing. Like one of my favorite, least favorite questions is, "What's your greatest weakness?" Like, could you be like a little more positive instead of trying to like say oh yeah, here's something I'm terrible at. Let me tell you all about it. You don't want to talk about negative things or just like cast yourself in a negative light at all in an interview. So there are ways to turn that question around to something a little bit more positive or to give yourself more control. So, okay. So how about Cyndi, if you would like maybe summarize where you come, like how you got to design, um, and your first job out of Harper, and then your current one.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So I started at Harper, I think it was 2016 in the fall. And I've been a musician my whole life, classical musician. And basically, I came to a point, and a teacher. And I just came to a point where I was ready to be done with that. My kids were getting older, and it was just time for me to do something new. And I was just talking to some friends, and had been working, just kind of designing, here and there, nothing serious for my friends. And I was talking to them about wanting to start something new, and it came up that, why don't you just look into studying design a little bit more seriously than you have? And because I think you already have a knack for it. And I didn't even occur to me that would be something I could do, because I've been a musician all my life, and that was kind of just my identity. But then I just dived right in.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
You said classical musician.
Yeah,
Your instrument was
my instrument was the tuba.
excellent.
So you knew that.
I knew that, but they don't know that.
So, yeah. So I played in symphony orchestras and stuff like that for probably 20 years. And I taught at the college level. Um, just That's just what I knew, and that's what I did. But at one point I just got burned out. And I think that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah. Okay.
In whatever it is. There's a lot of people say, "Oh, I went into design after being in the corporate world," or whatever. Because you can only do something for so long sometimes. And then, some people just get burned out.
Yeah.
So that happened to me.
All right.
But I still do music, but now I have my own like rock band that I do that as well. But that's way more fun for me. So after Harper, I did my internship at Northwest Electrical in Mount Prospect, which probably the lighting class goes to as a field trip. And that's when I knew I wanted to go there because I walked in and saw all the pretty lights and everything. And I was like, oh, I really want to work here or something. I did it just, I wanted to be there. So when it came time to do my internship, that's where I chose to go. And they had an opening. So that's where I was. And I did that for a year almost to the day. And then I was ready to move on to um, getting more of a design assistant type job. So from there, I went to a design firm and I did get a job at this design firm. And what I noticed at that place was I was going to be an assistant for the lead designer at that the place, and he was also a musician before he was a designer. So it worked out really well that we could come from the same background. And actually, I think that's what got me the job. Because sometimes your rapport with people, how you get along with people, and how you uh, just interact. And if you have things in common, that's sometimes a very important thing. Um, I mean, your resume is great to have a nice resume and have a good portfolio, but you have to resonate with the people somehow. And I think that because of that, I did get that job. I'm not going to say where it is because it turned out to be horrible. So, um, what ended up happening was I wasn't ready for that type of job because there were contractors and there were people constantly calling me all the time on my personal phone, and it just got to be very intense very quickly. And my boss turned out to be really super high strung, and it was just way too much for me. I could do the job fine, but as being there, I realized that wasn't for me. And sometimes that's going to happen. Not every job is going to be something that's going to be, your dream job. So I knew that going in. So I was only there for like 2 weeks, and I knew that that wasn't the place for me because I was getting stomach aches every day when I was there. It was really stressful. So um, I started looking around for something else to do. So I looked at the Arlington Design Center, which is in Arlington Heights, and maybe some of you have gone to a field trip there, either at Cravat or CAI or something, maybe Chicago Design Source. Chicago Design Source is where I worked for 4 years, but I didn't get that job right away because they're managing. I guess the manager who was doing the interviewing was sick, so she started this process and then got sick, and so then that got dropped off. So then I was like, well, I have to have a job. So I did floor and decor for like 3 months. And I mean, that interview was like anybody could get that job, because it was like a cashier job. So basically you go in, and as long as you graduated high school, you could get that job. So that for interview purposes, that's not a job I would talk about. So I worked there for like 3 months, from 7 in the morning until noon, pretty much every day. And I just kept waiting for the Chicago Design Source thing to happen. And I, would put out some resumes here and there, other places. And then finally I got a call from Chicago Design Source, and they said, we'd like you to come in for an interview. So I went in and talked to the manager, and it was the same kind of thing with the other interview where I found out that she and I went to the same high school. So we had that in common. And she also went to Harper. So we had that in common. And we just really hit it off as colleagues right away. And that's really important, I think, to be able to talk to people about something that they might have in common. Not that you're going to know that, but if you listen to things that they say, you can always jump in on something that is relatable in your life. I think that's important because people want to hear that kind of thing. And of course, my resume from Harper, and I had a little portfolio and stuff like that, which I made on my own. Is I actually didn't take your class. I did it all by myself. But anyway, don't say that. So I ended up getting that job. I didn't get the job that I applied for, but that was okay. I was gonna apply for the what do they call it? Designer services. So basically, that's the person in the showroom that would help the designers pick out things, find furniture that's appropriate for what they need and stuff like that. But they put me in the fabric library, which was fine because then I did that for 2 years and I got to learn more about fabrics and trim and some furniture and how the back of the house works. And also, I did a lot of display. I made sure all the displays looked good and or order what we needed to order. So it was really educational for me too, because not knowing that part of the design business, it was nice to do that for a little while. And what I did at the lighting place was basically I was in the showroom and I did some design work with the designers, but not a whole lot. So I went from lighting basically to fabrics and furnitures and stuff like that. Floor and decor, I don't really talk about it. So then after 2 years of that, the lady who was the supervisor of that area had to take a leave of absence. So then I moved up to the supervisor position, which was really awesome too, because I got to know a lot of the representatives from all of the fabric companies and furniture companies on a personal level. And I got to know a lot of designers. And that was very valuable too, because then after I was there for 4 years total, I was like, I think now I'm going to try again to be a design assistant somewhere. And I overheard some designers that I got to know while working there that said they were contemplating having a design assistant come on. So I immediately walked over to her and I was like, so I overheard that you're looking for a design assistant. So in the right place at the right time. A lot of times you should be. And then also going to the NKBA and all those types of things, you network with people, you'll find that people are looking for jobs, and that's a great way to do that. So I did an interview there, and I just loved them to death. There was a place in Barrington, and I was a shoe-in because they all knew me anyways, and they knew my work ethic from the other place. I didn't end up getting that job because the owner decided she didn't want to spend the money on hiring another person after all. So I didn't get that one. Okay, so then I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? All right, I'll just keep putting out my resume on Indeed. And way back when I was in Harper, I went to the job placement office and they helped me get my resume looking as professional as possible. Because I had one for music, but I didn't really have one set up for design. So that's a really valuable thing if you can go to that office, which you may already have done as part of some of your classes. But that's a good idea. So then I just kept doing Indeed applications over and over. I kept getting a lot of rejections. You just have to keep going and not worry about it. And I think I did 3 or 4 interviews. So one example of a bad interview was I went to this place called Air Room, which is a big corporation, really, kitchens and baths and stuff. And not to diss them, but when I went in there, the guy who was supposed to talk to me didn't know what position I was even applying for. So I was like, okay, that's not the best way to start an interview. So, and then it just went downhill from there. And the questions he was asking me didn't really pertain to what the job was, and it felt really awful. So sometimes that's going to happen. And whatever. I got frustrated and I went home and I looked for the next one because I think that's where you just have to just keep going. I applied for CAD jobs, designer assistant jobs. Some of those required a 4-year degree. So I was like, okay, well, that's not me. So I just kept going and kept plowing ahead. And I tried another job at Contact Lighting, which is where Mike Lehman actually is employed. And the lighting teacher, in case you guys haven't taken the lighting classes. But that particular job, I didn't have enough experience in the lighting area where they wanted to put me. And I remember in that interview, I tried so hard to make it sound like I knew more than I did, and it wasn't flying because because they know when you're making up stuff. So not that I was super making it up, but I really wanted a job. I really wanted to get out of where I was and start something else. So I started to just kind of, oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I can do that. Some of it I could have learned on the job, but they wanted someone who could come in and just, start. So that was a problem I thought for me. And I was like, okay, I have to figure out how to get a job with an interview where I feel super comfortable. So I went online actually and I just searched up interview questions and I studied it. I studied what kind of questions you're going to be asked and what questions are more important than others and how you should answer them. And I basically went back to school and
I
I
have a,
did some coursework. Like, huh?
I have a question.
What did you say? Oh,
I,
sure.
so you looked online
Right.
for questions. Where did you look?
I just Googled it on YouTube. I just Googled interview questions, interview help, interview tutorials, and I weeded out a couple that didn't seem so legit. But there was one, I think it was one woman.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't know the name of who that was, but
Okay.
if you stick with it and you listen to what they're saying, if it resonates with you, then and you think it's a cool online free course, just do it. Because then I could sit down and think about what is my weakness because they're going to ask it.
Mhm.
And like you said, you can turn that into a positive. My weakness is that I'm kind of a perfectionist. And sometimes my perfectionism, I'll expect other people to be having that same idea that I have that may be a perfectionist thing, but not everybody's going to be the same as me.
Mhm.
So sometimes I get irritated with people when they're not on the same brainwave as me. So, um, but the positive spin is that I always look to improve the best of my ability, and I can always suggest to people other ways to do things because I've been a teacher. Also, that helps because I can relate to people and tell them things or suggest things as a teacher and not as a dictator or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like, you can't do that.
There's a difference
Yeah.
between,
So being a teacher for me,
yeah. I mean, there's a difference between being a leader and being a boss.
exactly.
So, but that question, like,
And I think I was able to say that.
yeah, that's good. I mean, being the question of like what's your like to like identify a weakness. Um, to say it's a weakness is really not fair to the person. Uh, there are always
Mm-hmm.
things you can become that you don't know, or things you can be better at. And so that's really more like the way to turn it is to say, well, I mean, I personally would probably say, well, I don't consider this a weakness, but here are some areas where I would like to be better because
Right.
I want, like I know these things, I would like to know more in this area. Um, so, um, yeah, but it's hard to answer that question. Like if you stay with it as a weakness, it's hard to stay with that answer that question without making yourself sound bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I
Yeah. And that's one of those questions where I think it's important to research it and actually figure out what you will say because you're going to be asked that question.
it's a stock question that people ask because you're just supposed to ask that question. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
if you're a better interviewer, you would ask someone to talk about like where do you feel you need improvement rather than say tell me about your weakness.
Right.
I think it's a big difference, and being ready for that question, I think, is important. Um, and Also not being afraid of your interview.
Mm-hmm.
That's another important thing.
Yeah, you have to go in with confidence.
Yeah. So I think that was smart to research interviewing, but also to feel to like the lighting interview where you're trying to sound like you could do the job when they really wanted someone with more experience. You kind of catch yourself,
Right.
yeah, I'm kind of bullshitting here. Um, and you don't want to be that person. You want to be like interviewing for something where you can do the job. You know you have the skill already to do the job. Um,
Right.
yeah, well, that's cool.
Yeah, something came up in that interview too. I remember something about like at that point in my interviewing process, I was getting frustrated that I wasn't getting hired or whatever. And at that point, I remember that's why I started to do that because I started to get frustrated. Like, I really need to get a job that pays me more than what I'm making now. And I started to get frustrated. So I started to do that. And then I realized it after the fact. And I remember asking about the salary, and I started doing the things you're not really supposed to do because you're not really supposed to ask that question. Um, so I started to push that because I was just getting frustrated. But that was my lesson that I don't do that.
Yeah, it's fair to ask about a range, but really, like they should. I mean, you can let them tell you,
Yeah.
and
And I think that's more appropriate. And I started to just push it because I was frustrated.
yeah,
So I learned after that one. And
yeah,
that's when I started to do more of the YouTube stuff.
yeah, yeah. We had a
Yeah. And then I calmed down.
that's good. Well, you have not when you have some information, and it demystifies the interviewing process to see, like, to just get a better idea of what kinds of things can you expect from an interview, and make yourself feel more confident that you can just go into it and not worry about getting jumped by some surprise question that you can't answer.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You can't predict completely what they're going to ask you, but when I was at Harrington, we interviewed someone for a teaching position, and he didn't get it because his he kept pushing this idea that he wanted to get the job because he needed insurance because he had a chronic illness, and we're like,
Right.
okay, that was, and his qualifications were okay, but then there were other people that interviewed for the job that were clearly they were interested in the job, and he kept talking
Mm-hmm.
about insurance, and so it was kind of a like I didn't mean I was like, well, it's like okay, I mean he can do the job, um, but like he had the qualifications, but he seemed more interested in just getting insurance, and that did not sit well with most of the people on the committee. So I felt bad because he should have just shouldn't have said anything about it. He might have gotten the job, but he kind
Yeah,
of
that's the same thing I did.
yeah he bothered people about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to kind of hide your like if you have that motivation, if money is a motivation, insurance is a motivation, getting out of a lousy job is a motivation. You've got to hide that like those like they don't need to know about those what's going on in your life. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, you do have to emphasize that you're interested in the job. Yeah.
it it does seem surprising, and I've seen this with other like things people have written that one woman that's works for like a big design firm said like be sure that that you're clear that you're interested in the job. She said you'd be surprised how many people interview and never openly express interest in the job. They just sit there and answer questions.
Right.
They don't. So you're kind of like you're. It's challenging because like you're trying to you're. Some people will say like you're interviewing them while and they're interviewing you, but you're not in.
Yeah.
They're in a position of strength, and so they have the you have no power to hire yourself.
Yeah, that's interesting because now that you said that, you're interviewing them. That's what I learned on the YouTube videos.
Mhm.
And I took that to heart after that interview. Because you can ask them questions.
Yes, and you should because
Yeah,
that
and right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's important, but you just have to ask the right ones.
Well, it's almost like if you meet somebody for the first time and you ask like, "Oh, what do you do?" Like, "Oh, that's interesting. What kind of like like what? Tell me more about the details of what you do." And you can engage in someone. You let that person know, "I'm interested in you," and that person opens up and they're like, "Oh, this person is interested in me." So if you interview and you ask to say like, "I like you research their website, see like this is the kind of work they do." If you say like, "Oh, like this one, like this, um, this commercial project you did, the healthcare, like I really love the materials. What, like, tell me more about those. Like I love that project." That tells them that you, for one, at least you're aware of some of their work, you like their
Right.
work, and you want to be a part of it. So you do have to do that.
That's super important
Yeah.
because they want to hear about themselves too.
They
Yeah.
flatter them, not too much. Let them know you got to be aware. You got to be like someone like, "I know about you." That's one of the reasons I want to want this job is that I know about your company. So I'm aware of your portfolio.
Right. Yeah. So that leads me to my where I am now.
Yes, let's hear.
I did eventually get the job where I am now. By implementing things that you just said. Because at this point now, I was frustrated and I'm like, all right, I really screwed that up. So I'm gonna go back and figure out what my deepest like thoughts are about why I want to do this. Because you have to figure that out too. And you have to be able to tell an employer. It's almost like I don't know if you do this with art, like your philosophy of
Teaching philosophy
art.
or
Yeah.
art statement.
Yes. They do that with music. I don't know if they do that with interior design. But why not?
Yeah.
So you have to figure out in your heart why you're doing it. And then you need to portray that to the people who are interviewing you. So they know that you have a love for this and they can trust that you're going to put your heart into what they need you to do. So then by this point, I found this little alert came up on Indeed that someone was looking for a design assistant in Westmont at this place called Darrell Gruters. That's the designer's name. Darrell Gruters Limited. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I had already worked on my interview questions and figured out all this in my heart what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. And and I went into the first interview and talked to like their hiring manager. There's only like 5 people there, but she's the one who this one woman takes care of like human resources and stuff. And they had asked me to bring a portfolio, but what I did was I made a portfolio on Canva. I don't know if you guys talk about Canva or anything like that, but I put all my best work on Canva and made a video. It started with my picture and it said, Cyndi Stark, interior design, my number, my email. That was like the first slide. And then, it goes into my work. Then I would just describe on the bottom what they're looking at, um, what project it was, and then go to the next thing. And it just, I made it that way. And then I made a YouTube video out of it and made it private, or like when you can get a link to it,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
whatever you call that. So then I sent them the link so they could see that ahead of time. And I knew they looked at it because you can see how many views there are on it. So I was like, all right, they looked at it. Okay, that's good. So I went into the first interview and we talked, me and this girl talked, and it was the same as those other jobs that I got. We had a rapport together. And, you know, she has two little kids and I had kids, and we started talking about that. And that really broke the ice, I think. And she just started asking me questions, you know, the whole like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's also a very popular question. Um, and then after I said that, I asked her, where does Darryl, the owner, see himself in 5 years? Like, where is this company going in the next 5 years? You know, what's predicted for that? And so she'd tell me, and I started asking her questions, and I felt like really empowered suddenly,
Yeah.
but comfortable then at the same time, because then I didn't feel like I was getting like afraid of these questions. I felt like it was more of a conversation.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, and it was really super relaxed. And she said to me, "Yeah, well, he's looking for someone who might take over the business." And I had already just said something like that, like, I, you know, would love to own my own business or whatever. And then she comes out and says that, and I was like, "Oh, well, then maybe that'll be perfect." I mean, I don't know. And it was like a perfect interview. It was awesome. And I'm like, I feel really good about that. So they were gonna, of course, have a few more people coming in. So I had to wait a week. And then I got an email saying, "Can you come in for a second interview?" And then I talked to the owner and the office manager at the second interview. Um, so then I'm really nervous because it's the owner. And so I went in. He was the coolest guy. He just kind of like waltzed in and like sat down. He was like, "So, how's it going?" And it just was so laid back. And I think, well, I know now that she relayed very positive things that she discovered about me when I came in, the human resources person, to him. And so he already knew, you know, a lot about me coming in. So he was relaxed. And he said he already kind of had an idea that they liked me, and through the first interview. So this interview with him was so laid back. I mean, he barely asked me anything at that point, because I think the first interview took care of it all. But then I did ask him, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And he's like, "I see myself in a retirement home in Tampa, Florida," or whatever it was. And then we just joked around, and um, I told him about my music because I do that a lot. And I don't know, it was really super cool. And in Westmont, where I work, there's a car show on the street where their business is. And so you have to get out of the parking lot of our business before they close the streets and stuff for this car show, which happens, an antique car show every Thursday in the summer. So I remember saying, he told me about that, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I played there last summer, or whatever." And he's like, "Man, it's really frustrating when you can't get out of the parking lot." Because, and I go, "Yeah, that must be a real pain in the ass." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Did I say that? But I just let that go, and we all laughed, and it was fine. And that was probably the best interview I've had because I was so relaxed and ready for all the questions.
Good.
Yeah, and he had said in the interview, um, no, I think I said it first. I said I get a really good vibe when I walk in here, and that's the kind of thing they want to hear.
Yeah.
I said, "Man, when I walked in, it was so comfortable here and so like calming, and the atmosphere is just really welcoming." And then that's what they want to hear, stuff like that.
Great.
So then he's like, "Yeah, I mean, we really try to just be friends with each other and motivate each other and, you know, push each other." And now that I work there, that place is the best job I've ever had in my life.
Great.
And what he said is true. Everyone's so encouraging. Everyone has everyone's back. There's no animosity with anyone, and we're literally laughing all day long.
Good.
So yeah, when I said that thing about being a pain in the ass, I felt bad, but you should hear how we talk sometimes in there now. I mean, it just what I said was totally the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And he, I think, felt comfortable. So I don't know. I think because I did my research and stuff, I could go in feeling comfortable. So I think it worked out.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, it's the way a lot of people really speak, and so you were genuinely yourself
Mm-hmm.
saying that, and if that fits, it fits the fits his, I guess, the way he does things, then that's good.
Yeah. The vibe is that was totally the vibe. Just joke around and be real. And I can do that every day.
Good.
It's great. You know, they did say to me once that there were some interviews of younger people who came in, maybe like 20, 21, something like that. And one thing that they did mention is that those younger people were always very scared and they could feel the fear. And one they said one girl had a physical portfolio and she just like always had her head down and she just pushed the portfolio forward on the table and then just like looked down and had nothing to say. So
It's
take that, you know.
it's very good. It's a very good point. Um, it's easy to think that, I mean, your work, if you're showing your work to somebody, then you're exposed,
Mm-hmm.
and you're exposed to criticism, but you're also exposed to praise. So you shouldn't assume that your work is just going to get attacked. Um, Even if someone asks you, like, "Oh, tell me about this," they're not saying like, "This is lousy. What's the matter with you?" Maybe they just want to know, like, they want to see like what kinds of things do you say about your own work, which is where I think that is a good, the idea of having a design statement is a good one. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's um, um, something I think that maybe as this class will talk about later on in the class. Like, maybe at the midterm we'll talk about design statement. Because that is like, artists have an art, you write an artist statement and they're hard to write because what do you say
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't sound trite or generic or like somebody else? Like it's like it's you have to there's a lot of introspection, and like you also have to write a bad one first to get just to get ideas out. Because even like, like if I'm writing something from scratch, I have to just get something on paper first. And I know it's not going to be good, but I've got to just like the first thing, like it's just like the first idea comes to mind, fine, write it down and begin there. And then you work off of it and say, okay, that's kind of stupid, but it's not, maybe it's like it's a, if the idea is good, but the way it's written is um, unsophisticated. Uh,
That's kind of like art when you're making art and design work. You just start,
yes.
and it might not be great, but you have to start somewhere. And then I noticed that when I'm designing something, if I have a feel like an emotional reaction towards it that's a negative, I'm not finished.
Yeah.
It's not it's not done until I can look at it and say, calm. I'm calm. It's great.
Very good point.
Yeah. Same with that design thing. You have to design statement. You have to just figure it out. It takes time. And when it's right, you'll know.
And you read other people's design statements. You also, if you read about like um, things other people have said that are kind of like aphorisms, like one of Mies van der Rohe's most famous comments, um, that God lives in the details, and that means something. And it's it's of course it's meant to mean that like you've got to focus on every aspect of design to make it really beautiful. can't just gloss over some parts of your work. Um, and taking a statement like that as a beginning, like if you were to just type first at the top of the page, God lives in the details, or look for something else, some smart thing that Florence Knowles said, or that um, Coco Chanel said, or something that somebody said something that was like it's a brilliant one, just like it's a brilliant phrase. And then you start your design philosophy reflecting on that. That might be a good place to start because you find something that you think like, yes, that's true. And then you work off of that and come up with your own truth from of like why are you doing this? Because it's a creative practice. Um, and what makes creative work um, good is that it is not like it's coming from that individual that's making it. It's not just a copy of somebody else's work.
Mm-hmm.
True in music, true in visual art, true in design. Um, it can be related, it can be sort of like related to other works. It can be fall within a certain range of theme or style, but it's definitely something, it's something that you made.
Yep. And you have to believe it.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's really it's a very good point. And you know, um I think for all of everyone in the class, um it's to think about who are the designers you like. And if you can't think of very many people, start looking. You took the history class. There are a lot of people, in the 20th century that you can begin with, and then look at who are their contemporaries. Like Knoll International. There are a lot of designers that work for Knoll. You can look at
Mm-hmm.
a lot of work. You might discover work that you think is brilliant you've never seen before because it's not the most popular stuff. Um, you can look at, just read a biography of Eileen Gray or somebody that you whose work you admire. You can find the information. All right. So, Cyndi, what kinds of work are you doing at your job?
Um, well, the first thing I got thrown into on my first day was finding wallpaper for a 7 bedroom lake house in Wisconsin. And for all the bedrooms and bathrooms. That was what they had me do because that's a current job that I'm still working on. And we had 2 semi trucks of furniture and such go up there in 2 different trips in June, and they're not finished yet. But so I did that, and I picked out, depending on what furniture and other things had been picked out prior to me being there. Um, Basically, there's PowerPoints with all of the furniture that's picked out, rugs, everything that's picked out goes on a PowerPoint. And everybody can see these PowerPoints. So if you're building more of the room, you can already see what's in there.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would just go to our library, which we have a lot of wallpaper books and just loose wallpapers. And I would just color coordinate and try to figure out the vibe of each room and try maybe 3 or 4 different ways to go for each wallpaper. And what we do is we print the PowerPoints and we'll put the new stuff with it. So I had it all together and it's in this little package. And so every room had its own thing. And I got to present everything that I picked. My boss didn't do it, which was amazing because I was new and it was like 3 days into the job. He had total confidence. He didn't say anything. I presented after 3 days all the wallpapers and she picked one. Every room she picked one and liked it. And so that was the first time I experienced on a big level like that somebody enjoying what I picked. And it was like,
Yeah,
that's so cool.
feels good.
Yeah, that was the first thing I did. And so now there's 7 bedrooms, and I had to pick furniture now for all. They have bunk rooms, they've got CEO rooms. I mean, this is like high profile. This is high profile gig. So every client that we have is high profile. And he doesn't really advertise because of he doesn't want to do small jobs because he's got huge jobs.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm working on 3 different jobs now at one time. So I have a lady coming in tomorrow. So today, I made sure I had all of the um, for each room in her house. She wants different things. So we take pictures, photos of the rooms, and we write down on the side what we want to do, or we write it on the picture on whatever chair, reupholster gray or reupholster floral or whatever. And we figure out everything that's supposed to be done in each room. And then I take the picture and I just find stuff. I'm sourcing things constantly. My boss designed that whole 7 bedroom, however many bathrooms, I don't know, there's a million, 2 kitchens, a bar, there's a golf simulator in the basement, movie room. I mean, he designed it from ground up. So then he just kind of gives it to us to say, okay, furnish it. And we're just like, all right. So it's just really great to be in an atmosphere where you're not having someone like, look down on, what are you doing? What are you doing? Free to do what I want. And if he glances over and is like, that's a little too gold, then I go, great. And then I'll go move on. Or he'll go, that's not really the vibe of that particular room, maybe less glitzy. Great. I'll find something else. And when it's good, he lets you know.
Good.
And it's fabulous. It's really the best job I've ever had. And then there's someone who does billing. And then there's the human resources, the girl who does also the shipping, because we have a certain trucking slash inventory company. Like when we order furniture, it goes to this place, R&R it's called, delivery services. They have a warehouse, so all of the stuff goes to the warehouse and it sits there until it's ready to go to whatever house it is. And then they load a truck, and in this case it was 2 semis that went up to this house in Wisconsin. And so that's how that all works. But we have to figure out, okay, is everything on time? How many weeks is it going to take to get this sofa? Yeah. And are we going to have a special fabric on the sofa, or is it going to come like it is in the picture in the catalog or whatever, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of steps that goes through that. Because if you are going to put a separate fabric on from a different company, you have to make sure the fabric from that company goes to the furniture company. Has to be enough fabric to make sure it covers and stuff like that. There's a lot of, I don't do that, but there is 2 people who do that. So I do all the design stuff on the inside.
Can I ask a quick question, Cyndi?
Sure. Yeah.
One of the things, I've found like there could probably be more information at Harper about is sourcing. Mm-hmm. And when you're working at this company, they direct you on like, here are our favorite sources. And what does that look like? Is that you like meeting with a rep, or you like looking online at photos? And is that all companies that are just trade only?
Yeah, they are trade only. Sometimes if we can't find something that's just for the trade, we might go to Crate and Barrel or something like that if we really can't find it, or if it's too expensive. Because a lot of these furniture companies are really high end, and sometimes these clients get kind of like burnout if it's a huge job, and then by the end they don't want to pay $12,000 for the sofa, so we have to figure out other things. But I would say 98% of it is trade only. And luckily, when I worked for Chicago Design Source, I got to know a lot of the reps there. So then going to this place, now I email them and say, do you have any new collections? Can you bring them in? And so I have the same rapport with the same people, which is nice. But basically, I'm online looking for stuff. And if there is a question, I'll just call the rep and say, I'm not sure how big this is. It's not clear on the website or whatever. Or just email or that kind of thing. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay, good. And he also, at my job, they have someone who does all the CAD work. So I don't do that. So they hire out for that.
Cool.
Yeah, it was going to be part of my job, but we realized very early on that there's no way I have time for that. So we've got currently probably 8 jobs, and they're huge. So there's no time for me to be, oh, okay, well, we're changing this chair to a sofa. Okay, there's no time for that. Yeah.
Laura, it's an interesting point that, like there are certain things that don't get covered much, and just in terms of like the business, or like the execution of the design work after you do the
Right.
design, but then like you've got to get everything. And so you've got to be able to buy it for your client, and where do you get it, and the trade.
Yes, and we have like a listing of all of the companies that we use for whatever it is, like mirrors. There's a list of where do you find mirrors, where do you find this, where do you find that. So it's all already in the job. But if you guys are looking to get a job to learn the ins and outs, like when I worked at Chicago Design Source, that was a great idea for me because I learned a lot about the back end of everything. So going into this job, I'm like, oh yeah, that's going to be a Vanguard sofa. Okay, I know Vanguard. I know Amy, the rep, whatever. And now I'm like, yeah, like that was a good way to go first.
It takes some years to get to where you're at now,
Mm-hmm.
where like you did lighting, and then years at Chicago Design Source, where you don't have to think about a lot of it,
Right.
because you did it for 4 years, and sometimes it's not exciting when some of the jobs you have might not be too thrilling, but if you work at a place that is specialized, that even just like furnishings and fabrics, like just like surfacing materials, that kind of thing, something that's like a only one part of it, and you learn a lot about it, you move on someplace else, um, that just helps you.
Oh, for sure. And everyone will do stuff differently, so you're going to learn something new everywhere you go. Yeah, and I get to go to carpet stores and tile places, and I mean, I'm doing it. It's great, and it took 5 years, but a lot of things take 5 years to finally like get your feet, planted.
But the idea of like where you're going to be in 5 years, or where you see yourself in 5 years. One of the people like when I was in grad school, one of the professors that I worked with used to always tell us, said, you really don't know where you're going to be in 5 years. So tell me where you're going to be in 5 years. It'll probably be someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it could be close to where you're at now or close to where you want to be. It could be very far. People like it to be open to what's available to you, and work with it, because like the job you want might not be available, or you might not be ready for the job you want. You might not have enough experience.
Exactly.
You have to go get it, and then say like, fine, 5 years, I'm going to come back and try this again. You got to just go and work on building a stronger base of knowledge.
Yeah, and I think you have to have a goal. So at least give yourself a goal for the 5 years. Because even in my music, like I said, I gave myself a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And by 5 years, I wanted to play festivals and play in a bigger stages. I'm doing it. at 4 years. So I keep that in my head. Always keep the goal in your brain, and you'll just kind of like move towards it, and just keep that goal always.
Yeah. The best, one of the best little like fortune cookie fortunes I ever got is a goal is a dream with a deadline.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about the music before we go. What kind of music you play?
Oh, my band plays like blues rock with a little reggae and sometimes some New Orleans influence stuff. So, I don't know. And I just started writing music in like 2017, I believe, I think. But I already had experience being a musician and stuff like that. So I kind of know how to write music, but I never wrote it before. And so I write music for my band to perform, and we're getting a lot more. And the band is called Sticky Gumbo. People are always like, what? What is the name? Stinky Gumbo? I'm like, no, not stinky, it's sticky. But I mean, and my logo is a crayfish, and that's all from the New Orleans influence, because when I was a kid, I was influenced by the music of New Orleans when I was like 13, because I had a teacher who took the Dixieland music that you hear all the time in New Orleans, and he wrote it out for us little kids.
Oh, cool.
And we were playing Dixieland music pretty much to the same way that the professionals were. He wrote it to be pretty close. And so I had a big connection to New Orleans, even at 13. And then I went to New Orleans a couple times, and it was one of those things where I got off the plane and I felt like I was home, and I had never been there before. Very weird. But so when I write my music, it just comes out, that sort of flair, the New Orleans flair kind of comes out. And reggae too. The same thing happened when I went to teach music in Jamaica. I got off the plane, stepped outside, and that was another place where I was like, whoa, this is amazing. But those two places are very similar.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
In background and history, and very similar. So it's not crazy that those two places feel like home.
That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, Sticky Gumbo on Spotify. Yeah, I just released a live album. Cool. We played a concert in Yorkville and we recorded it. And so
nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
You can do more than one thing, and you can be more than one thing. You are like, you can be interested in and practice multiple things at the same time. There is time in the day.
Yes. And for me, I'm just being authentic to myself.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Cyndi.
Sure. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. Any final questions for Cyndi from any of you? No? Okay. We appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you for your time, Cyndi.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Cyndi.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
You bet.
All right. Well, we will end here then. And we'll have another meeting in 2 weeks. I believe I'll double check that schedule. Yeah, the schedule is 2 weeks. So I'll send you another link to the Zoom meeting for it. Okay? Think about your design philosophy statement. We'll do it more informally since it's not technically part of the class. Okay? Okay. Good night, everyone. Cyndi, again, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice to see you.
Yeah. I said hi.
Huh?
Good night.
I said hi.
Tell kids I said hi. Okay, awesome. I will. Thank you. See ya.